Hello all, we are live. I'm gonna hang around for a bit before we get started just to make sure everyone has the time to join. For those of you in the chat, say hi, say where you're from, say what you're interested in. Let's get the conversation started. I'm gonna start sharing this. There we go. Hey, Lydia. Great to have you with us. All right, I might get us started then. All right, well, welcome everyone to Online Payments, a crash course for developers. I am your host, DK, and in the chat, joined by Cameron, our customer success and support champion. So if you have any questions throughout it, feel free to put them in the chat. Either Cam will answer them or he'll let me know and I'll give you an answer for them. So without further ado, let's get into it. So this is our first webinar in this dev-focused format. So I'm going to start by giving you a little bit of background who I am. Pinch Payments, we are focused on real people. So our tagline is payments technology by real people. I'm DK or Damien Carzon. I've been at Pinch about 2 years, and one of my favorite things to do is change my job title depending on who I'm talking to. So I do things like product engineering. I do developer advocacy things. I do integration things. I wear Hawaiian shirts. So that's a little bit about me. So as part of the developer advocacy, if you sign up as a developer for Pinch, you will get an email from me. And I will most of the time have a one-on-one with you to understand your problems and see how Pinch can help you with your payments integration or whatever you need to do within the payment systems. So that's a bit about me. Let's get on to what we're doing today. This being the first one, I kind of wanted to take a bit of a background into the payments landscape or ecosystem and give you an understanding of what actually happens under the hood. So I'm going to start with some industry terms just to get you across what things actually mean, who are these players behind the scenes, and what a actual transaction flow looks like. So beyond the payments API side of it, what actually happens under the hood when, does the money move? Where are all these pieces happening? So I'll talk a bit about that, just to give you a bit of context around what the payment industry does and how it works under the hood. I'll touch on a little bit of why you should care as developers, why you need to know stuff like that, or why it could help you. And then I'm going to take a look at some fun things that we've been working on. All right, so let's get to it. Apologies for the wall of text, but this is how we kind of need to progress to get some definitions out to you all, and then it'll start to make sense once I put it all together, and it's a bit prettier later on. Don't worry. All right, so these are the kind of first 5 industry terms that we're going to talk about. So first one is card holders. This one's pretty straightforward. This is individuals or organizations that initiate payments, people with credit cards, effectively. For this presentation, I'm mostly going to be focusing on credit card style transactions rather than bank accounts. That's a whole nother system with a whole nother set of flows, which we could potentially cover in a later episode or a follow-up webinar if there's interest in that. So the next thing is the merchants. These are businesses or individuals that are actually doing the selling. They, have an account, a bank account, and they're trying to accept card payments. We have issuers. And these are the banks or financial institutions that issue credit cards or debit cards to these cardholders. I'll have some better examples of who each of these are later on. I'm just giving you the terms now so that we can later go through it. Acquirers. So these are the, I guess they're often called acquiring banks as well. They provide the merchants with the means to accept card payments. And they work with card networks to facilitate that. We then have card networks. So these are the entities like Visa, MasterCard, Amex, I think Maestro as well. There's a handful of these, and these do the actual facilitation of the transfers between the acquirers and the issuers, or the banking systems under the hood. So I put those 5 together because I found this fun little animation from MasterCard showing the movement of a transaction through those 5. So as you can see, the cardholder wants to make a payment. They make a payment to the merchant, and that kicks off the authorization process, which goes to the acquirer. The acquirer then talks to the card network. In this case, it's MasterCard there. They then talk to the issuer bank, and the issuer bank runs the verification checks to make sure that that is a valid transaction and that card is correct. And then it goes back through the flow to let the cardholder or let the merchant know that, yes, this transaction can happen and the cardholder can make the payment. Are we all following so far? All right, next up. This next set is where it starts to get a bit more complicated and it adds a bit more layers to it. So first off, there's the payment processors. These are the companies that handle the technical aspects of payment processing, the authorization flows, the actual settling of transactions. And then we have payment gateways. So these are the digital services that transfer the actual funds between the accounts. They communicate with the networks. They're the kind of bridge between the different entities in the industry. We also have payment service providers. So this one is a bit interesting because they can offer multiple pieces of this flow. So they can be a gateway, a processor. They can offer other financial services. Then we have independent sales organizations or ISOs. These are companies that on-sell the various services within the chain to other companies or on behalf of, say, the acquirers or the processors or even the gateways in some instances. Then we have a payment facilitator or a Payfac. And this is the company that manages the facilitation of the payments as a whole. They aggregate merchant accounts into single entities and connect to the different pieces of the infrastructure, such as the gateways. All right. So now we get onto the interactive part of the presentation. So let me just switch over here. So these are the entities that I just talked about a little bit. As you can see, there's a few more than the previous diagram. I've also added some examples of who these individual pieces are. So you can see gateways. Pinch acts as a gateway in this scenario. We've got a couple of processors, some of the different card networks, some of the issuers and acquirers, for examples. Obviously, there's more than what I've listed here. These are just to give you an understanding of who these people are. You can see American Express acts as all three of these. They like to get involved in everything for their cards, which is interesting. All right. So now what I want to try and do is map out the flow between these. And to do that, I'll talk you through it as I connect the dots. So as before, you could see we have card holders. They want to make a payment to a merchant. They give the merchant, through whatever interface they have, signed up for, or whatever way they have to collect that data from the customer or the card holder. That payment data is then sent to the gateway, and this is when a thing called tokenization typically happens, so that the merchant doesn't have to deal directly with credit card numbers and raw card data. So tokenization is when the raw card details that the cardholder enters get sent directly from the cardholder's device or web browser in most instances for online payments. They get sent directly to the gateway, so that the gateway is the one that deals with the raw card data, and the merchant themselves, their website, doesn't have to be PCI compliant in that way. They then return a token that can be used, but I'm getting ahead of myself. So once the card data gets to the gateway, that's sent to the processor. The processor is what receives that raw card data and then sends that on to the specific card networks. So these all kind of, a lot of them work together to support each other. But there are, you can get processors that send to the different card networks specifically. So that card network then understands who this card holder is and all their card information. So they then know which issuer to contact to verify this transaction. So they talk to the specific bank or whoever issued the card to make sure that, yes, that is correct. I can make that transaction. So then this response goes back to the card network to say, yes, I can make that. And then again, back to the processor, through the gateway, back to the merchant to say, yes, go ahead and make this transaction. So that's kind of what kicks off a transaction flow. And then what happens in the background, the acquirer and the issuer talk to each other and say, hey, these transactions have happened. We need to move these funds around. So then that happens somewhat in the background. and notifications go around for settlements and disbursements. But that's a whole nother diagram, which if there's interest, I can cover in a follow-up webinar. So that's the kind of flow of a credit card transaction for an online payment. Obviously, there are certain pieces in this that can change. There are, you can see, multiple gateways here that some of the gateway do the processing as well. So that is not a round trip like that. It's just a single instance. And yeah, there's various different interfaces and ways that these can connect. So it's a whole lot happening. And that's probably a good time to open up to any questions about this flow. If there are, let me know. If not, I'll move on to the next part. All right. No questions by the looks of it. Cam's not yelling at me, so we're good. So taking all that in, next thing I wanted to do is just touch on why we as developers should care about the payment industry. Obviously, I care deeply about it because I'm in that industry, but other developers who aren't directly in payments should also care about the payments industry as well. First reason is because it's a huge industry. It's absolutely massive, and there's so many moving parts to it. As you could see from that specific diagram, there's multiple parts to it and that's just one side of the payment. So it's a massive industry, and it's constantly growing, especially with e-commerce and online shopping. It's just getting huge. More credit cards are being issued than ever before. So yeah, it's huge. Payments are also business critical in almost every case. Businesses need money to function, and payments in a lot of cases is how they get it. So most businesses are selling a service or a product. They need to have payment infrastructure to facilitate that. So a lot of the time, developers do end up getting, having to do payment integration because their businesses need it. The next reason is career growth. So there's, as I said, it's a huge industry and it's business critical. That means a lot of companies will be looking at payment experience as a plus, as a benefit for them when they're hiring developers. And then finally, it helps with integration skills. A lot of the time, you're integrating with quite simple APIs, but dealing with payments are some of the worst documented and most complex APIs you will ever deal with. So this is definitely a help in that instance, because it gets you exposed to those kind of challenges that other potential industries don't have. Just checking on questions. No, we're all good. All right. Now you've made it through the somewhat boring bit. Question: is processor and switch the same? So Joe's given a bit of an answer. I guess let me get back to it a bit. So the answer is kind of. A switch often refers to, I believe, these two kind of combined. They have a very similar function, and I think a lot of the time that word is probably interchangeable, because this is what connects to the card networks or switches to the card networks. All right, so I'm going to go through a bit of a demo of some integration work that we've been working on that helps unlock some of the Pinch API features for developers without writing code. Just because recently we've been working on, or I've been working on a bunch of low-code type solutions to be able to connect things and automate things together. So the first one I'm going to look at is a tool called N8N. N8N is a workflow automation software, and it allows connection of multiple nodes that do various tasks, such as call an API, update a database, various logical flows like that. So let me just zoom in a little bit so it's better. We've quietly released a pinch node for N8N, which allows you to do some pretty cool things. So, Brendan, this is N8N. I think I've got a link to it at the end. If not, I'll find it. Home Assistant is similar, yes, but not quite. So in here, I've got our pinch nodes installed. So you can see here, I want to add a trigger. So I've got pinch nodes here. But what I want to do is let's think of a scenario where I have customers entering their data that I then want to, I've got a form on my website that I want people to use to create an account and push that into Pinch. So what I want to start with is just a form here. N8N has built-in functionality for forms. So I can just create a form on the fly here. You can also use other form providers like Google Forms or Typeform, Jotform. All of those can connect to N8N as well. But for this instance, I'm just going to use their built-in form. So I'm just going to set some things here. Make that required. Yeah. And I'm going to change that to respond when the workflow finishes. I'll show you why later on. So if I test this out, it gives me a form. You've all seen this kind of form builder before, nothing new, so I will keep going. The new things from here, though, what I can do now is well, that's not how you spell it, make a HTTP call. And I want to call the Pinch API using this. So now that I've got our Pinch nodes installed, it also unlocks this predefined credential type, which I can search for here and say Pinch API. and I've got some credentials that I've set up previously. So what I want to do is grab that form response. Oh, one sec. I need to put that in. Oh, could you guys couldn't see the form, could you? Because it was in a different window. My bad. Let me just quickly share this one. There we go. So this is what that form looks like that I just created. It's very simple. I probably didn't actually need to show it. I'm just going to submit this for now. Yep, it had a problem. But what I can do now is in this node, I can see the data that's entered. So if I go back to my API node where I'm going to hit the pinch API, yep, it had no body. So what I need to do is add the body to this. And what N8N does really well is allows you to move data between these nodes. So if I just drag that in there, you can see it's going to grab the first name field from that form. And the same if I do last name. And then again for email. So that should be all I need. And that's going to call out to the pinch API in sandbox mode to create a new payer for me. So if I hit test, there you go. You can see it's created a payer in my pinch account. So if I actually switch over into my pinch dashboard and go to payers, you can see this is, yes, this is the one that's just created from that workflow. So in its current state, if anyone enters that form details into that form, it'll send that payer over to pinch. And then the last thing I'm going to do is finish off the form. So say form ending, say signed up, and payer ID is that. So there's a super simple example of using the pinch nodes in N8N for a workflow. So if I do this, submit, there you go. You can see it's created my payer. So that's a pretty simple example of the types of things you can do. So now let's get a bit more advanced. Here's one I've prepared earlier. So now say you've got a sign up form, but you also want to add payment input or credit card capture into that flow. How then do you go about doing that in this kind of environment? So this is a automation in N8N for a hosted credit card capture flow that starts off with a form as before. You enter a name and an email similar to what I previously had. The next thing this does is generate a unique ID. This is just something so that we can store who that person is, because I then save that info to the database. So ID, name, and email into a pinch payments table. This is just for an example. To do this, you'd actually have something in your own system that you store this data. But this is just to give you an understanding of what's possible. Then I have a code node that sets up a payment link. So I've gone ahead and built a static HTML page that captures credit card information and posts it, tokenizes it, and then posts the token to a arbitrary URL. Obviously, if you're building this into your own system, you'd have a few more safeguards in place so that only yours can do it, and you don't just accept any publishable key or any URL like this. But this is an example to show possibilities. So once it does that, it's going to respond to that form by redirecting to the payment URL. So, and that payment URL will then capture the credit card information, tokenize it, and then send the user back as a post to this, what's a webhook trigger in N8N. The webhook trigger will do a small amount of validation to make sure that the ID that it gets is in the same format as the previous IDs that we generated. And then it'll look up that record in the database from before that we saved. And now it's going to do a similar thing to before, where we call the payers API. But this time it's a little bit more complex because we're also creating a source, a payment source here using that token that we've created. So what this basically means is anyone that enters that form and then enters their credit card information will have a payer created in Pinch with a payment source that can then be used to take payments in the future. And then to finish off, we respond to the original webhook that this gets then shown to the customer who's doing the whole thing in the process. So there's a lot there, but I'm going to give you a test run so you can see what this flow actually looks like. So if I do a test, here's my form that I created in N8N form builder. I'm just going to enter my name. I might use a different email just to check on it. So if I submit that on the side here, you can see it's gone through this part of the flow now. So it's created the payment link, it's saved it to the database, and it's redirected me to this payment capture page. All right, enter credit card details for DK does tests. Let me see, let's go this one. This is a test mode. This is hitting the test mode APIs, so I can use some of our test cards without showing you my real cards. So I'm going to submit that. Sign up confirmed. Thank you for signing up, Damien. So if we go here into executions now, you can see there's a new one here, which is this webhook trigger. So this was what the payment capture flow. Yeah, I realized there's some of those credit cards in that list of my 1Password that are real, but you can't see the full number, so we're good, right? So yeah, this is that webhook that gets sent from that payment capture page. You can see there's two things that get sent, the ID and the token. So this is a token that has been sent through the Pinch API to tokenize those card details. And this token is only valid for use with my merchant account, the one that I gave the publishable key for. And it's only usable in the test environment, in the sandbox API mode. So then it went through validation and the database lookup. So you can see there it used that ID and looked me up from the database. There was the email that I entered. And then we made a call to the Pinch API to create a payer and a source, which is cool. And then we responded to that. So if I go back to my Pinch portal, I should have named these something different. I think it's this one. Yeah, there we go. So you can see here, this one's created, and I've got a credit card source attached to it. So now, if I want to take payment from this payer, I can do that freely using the Pinch API, because I've stored that payment source with this payer. So this unlocks me to do more integrations to say, to schedule specific payments or sign them up to a subscription, or any of that kind of thing I can now do now that I've stored that. I've got that credit card's information stored against this payer. This one. So that's pretty cool. And I hope that gives you an understanding of some of the things that are possible with these kind of integrations. And they're very much a way to get started and prove out things like that. If you're looking to build things really quick, this is a very helpful way to do that. So then the other things that the Pinch node allows us to do is listen for events. So if I have a look back at my Pinch node, you can see here, it's got a whole bunch of triggers here. There we go. So you can have it just listen for all events coming from the API. There's payer updated or created. There's subscription cancel, created, complete. There's bank results. There's schedule payment processed. There's transfers, real-time payments, payments created, refund events, compliance events, dispute events. So this single node in N8N can be used to do a whole bunch of things. So for instance, if I'm looking to listen for real-time events, I can set up this trigger to say real-time. I'm going to put it there. And then I can do something fun like a Google Sheet, append a row to that. And this is what lets you kind of save that information to somewhere else that needs it, feed it into a different system if you have a need for that kind of integration between Pinch for payments and another system that you have to keep track of your customers or payments or something like that, to marry up the two. So pretty powerful stuff. Lets you react to specific events that need to happen. You can also use it to make API calls and find out what you need to do. More like a reporting analyst type scenario. Yeah, you could use it for a reporting sense if you needed to. It's also got a lot of like integrations to other things. So in N8N, they allow you to connect to a whole bunch of other services. So if you have a need to react to when for instance, when a subscription is complete, you may have a business process that needs to kick off. So you may have something like a HubSpot for CRM. So if a subscription is complete, you might want to make an update to a contact record, or update a deal, for instance, to say this has been paid now, or this subscription is complete, and that can then in HubSpot fire off an email sequence to renewal and that kind of thing. It's just an easy way to get connected with all these different systems. So that's N8N. The other one that I wanted to show off is Zapier. Very similar style of integration, so I'm not going to go through the full list of, the full demo there. Am I seeing? Yeah, so Stripe also have an N8N node and a Zapier node. I want to say we had N8N node first, but N8N created the Stripe one themselves, which is a barrier that we'll get through one day. I haven't seen too much customer adoption of this just yet, mainly because we haven't publicized it too much. And the real thing for us currently that we're seeing is the barrier for this is that hosted checkout style page, where you can use the API to say, create me a payment link, and then you can then send that on to the customer. That is something that's coming to be able to do that. And that is what's really going to unlock the payment side of these integrations for us in the future. So yeah, for this example, I literally created my own page that did that, which I'd be happy to share if anyone's interested in that kind of thing. So yeah, Zapier, we have a very similar integration with Zapier. Again, it has a huge amount of apps, over 7,000 that it connects to. So you can see we've got pinch payments as a Zapier integration. It also does the events. So it listens for very similar events to what I showed in N8N. The difference is, if I go back to N8N, let me just kill these and set that. If I save that now and I go back into my pinch portal, I haven't tested this. No, maybe not. All right. What it actually does under the hood for this trigger node in N8N is creates a webhook within Pinch that it then listens for. That's different from how Zapier works because it uses polling on our API. So this happens, I want to say every 5 minutes, but it might be different depending on your plan or something like that. But it basically calls our API and checks for new events on our events API. For some reason, they didn't allow you to create webhooks or create endpoints for the webhooks to be listened for. They may have changed it since then, but yeah, it wasn't really too much of a problem at the time. But this allows you to do similar things. Oh yeah, there we go, 5 minutes. So you can listen for those specific events and then do actions based on that. And yeah, there's a huge amount of applications in here that you can then connect to. So again, if you wanted to, every time a real-time payment went through Pinch, you wanted to make a note of it in an Excel doc or save it to like your Salesforce instance or something like that. Put a notification in your Slack even. You can do that kind of thing with these tools. And again, Zapier has actions that we can do in the Pinch integration. So add a source to a payer, subscriptions, update payer records, create or update payments. You can also search for different types of entities. So it allows you to do a fair bit of stuff like that as well. All right, how are we all going? That is where the demo ends. All right. So here's a bunch of info about those two things. I probably should have put the N8N website on there. I'm seeing that now. But it's n8n.io if you want to have a look at that. Anyone else have any questions before we move on? Here's some information you can use to look up those various tools and their applications. All right, cool. So to close off, we've seen, I've gone through the payment show, the payment flow. My favorite Hawaiian shirt, it has to be the ice cream one that I have. I'll wear it if there's an episode 2. So our team will be at DDD Melbourne. For those you don't know, that's a developers conference in Melbourne on the 22nd of Feb. I will be presenting on some home automation stuff. Ben, our CTO, will be presenting on some of the old code in our code base, which should be very interesting. Have a look at our API docs. If you're interested in Pinch, you can sign up for a developer account for free. And if you do so, you'll get an email from me and we can chat about your specific requirements. Yeah, any other questions? No, I don't have a lobster Hawaiian shirt, unfortunately. I will get one eventually, I'm sure of it. Right. I'll give it another minute or so if there are questions. If there's anything else you want us to cover in this webinar, in a future webinar of this series, feel free to let us know. Send me an email, send support an email, reach out however you can, or drop it in the chat here if you've got an idea right now. Brendan had, what was the main driver for doing the low code stuff? I'd say the main driver was me doing low code stuff in my spare time. So I do a bunch of home automation and various other automation like that. And I started using N8N to automate some of our development process. So moving tasks around Asana, moving, when PRs are open in GitHub, reacting to move specific tasks in the right place. And I kind of dug into N8N a bit to see the kinds of things it could do. And I end up writing that pinch node for us to use. I might actually just quickly show you. So I basically wrote that as a way to automate our API test suite. So here is what gets run on our test environments every time we make a deployment. This runs through a whole bunch of API tests, just to make sure that anytime we change something, the API itself isn't affected. We've got a bunch of other test stuff behind the scenes, but this is mainly to focus on the API structure and make sure that these specific flows through the API don't break. So this is kind of where that stuff came from. Awesome. All right. Well, if that's all the questions, thanks all for coming. I hope this has been enjoyable. Come to a talk about, as in the API test suite, or I'll talk to you later about that. Might be a candidate for the next webinar, Brendan. talk a bit more about our automation flow. All right, thanks all. I'm gonna end it there. Hope it's been good. Thanks all. Have a good one.